Okay. All right. Can I get a mic check and confirmation that you see the web browser? Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go to Django. We're going to follow along this tutorial. And these are the main steps that we're going to do. We're going to set up a Python environment, in basically a Python container, which we've done in the past. Then we're going to use the Django library to create a new project. And then we're going to bring the vanilla project up. And then we're going to update this plain application with something we can edit. So in this particular example, we're going to add greetings. So kind of a hello world greeting, but at the web application layer or level. And so let's show you in picture form what that looks like. Okay. Slide 17. Needed to refresh. Okay. So again, we have our development host. So the first step is to create our container. So we'll create our Python container. Then the next step would be to create code within the container. We'll download a library and it'll create some folders and files for us. A lot of these frameworks, they have a command line utility or some sort of tool to help you scaffold and generate like a basic structure of an application to kind of help you get started. And then because we have our Docker Compose file, we're able to map the file that we generate because we're using a library here. We're going to have pip install the Django library, and that Django library gives us the utility to kind of scaffold these files. But the Django is inside the container. We're not using anything on the host to keep the host pristine. And then because we have the Docker Compose mapping, we're able to kind of map these files onto the host machine. So the Python files. I'm just messing that up. Folder. So that's the second step. Then the third step is then to kind of make sure that the app runs. That when we do Docker Compose and we bring up a web browser on our local host, on our development host machine, that we can actually hit the container and get back HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and that we can actually see some, you know, some HTML tags, something displayed on the browser. So that's the second one. The third item, and then finally the last item is we'll just add more files, like our custom .py files, so we can see more stuff on our app that is kind of like what we want to update what we want our application to be. So that's the high level overview of what we're going to do. And if there's no questions, comments, concerns about that, we can get started. Okay. So let's bring VS Code into here. So we might just do step 1 today and call it a day and continue tomorrow. I really don't want to skip through anything. So again, the links here will take you to the working code, which you can fork into your own account, and then you can make your updates. And then this links to the second article where it kind of just talks through. Okay, sorry, not this one. This one. So it just talks through the different pieces of the application. And then this is our end goal, to be able to create greetings, edit greetings, and delete greetings. Go through the CRUD of the greetings resource. All right, so let's do this. So same thing as before. Docker compose YML. So each service, we're going to have our app service. And then instead of using just an image, we're going to build this at the current directory. And this, whatever directory you specify, you need to have a Docker file. That's how Docker Compose and Docker knows how to build your image. And in this Docker file, we're gonna go from a Python image, and we'll go to Docker Hub, find out what's a good Python image to use. So all these special names are, I think this is, again, release candidate. Alpine is a very minimal OS to make your image smaller. That's really fancy stuff that I don't know how to appreciate, and I don't really use unless I'm in production. So for development, I just want something easy. And also, if you do go to production, you should check out Red Hat's UBI-based containers, because most of these, you're gonna want some backing like Red Hat. So it looks like the latest is 395. And then if we were to check Python's version, just to confirm we're not on some really outdated version. 3.9 is pretty recent, so we're comfortable using that. So back to our throw here. Let's save that. Oh, make sure Docker is running. All right, so we could do pull, but if the image doesn't exist, they normally just pull it for you. So we're gonna run our app service. And I think I might have done this before, so hopefully the image is already there. All right, so if we do a Python version, we're good. So that's essentially the first step here, where we have our container. And I think we might have time to do the second step. So we're gonna install the Django library inside the container and use it to generate our files. But in order to get our files out, we need to mount our host directory into the container so we can actually generate it and get the files back out of the container. And so you notice when we dropped in here, it dropped at the root. So we're also going to put in this working directory in our Docker file. So when we drop in here, we drop into the file that the folder that we actually want to be working in. Okay, so let's exit out of here. Update our Docker file. Try to get some space. And add our volumes. Okay. So again, Python version on a host is outdated. So let's see. We drop in here. So again, we're not dropped into the right directory, but our file is mounted. So the Docker Compose change has been picked up, but the Docker file, in order for that change to be picked up, we need to rebuild. Additionally, this work dir, there's a equivalent, I think is working dir. So you don't want to specify it in the Docker file, you can specify in the Docker Compose. But most of the time it's good practice to kind of let your users know, whoever's using your container, where your app is expecting the user to operate out of. All right, so it's been rebuilt, and if we drop into the container now, we should be dropped into the proper folder. Okay, so anything we create in this container will be will be acting on the actual host folder. Okay, so here's an article if you want to know more about working with files and containers. All right, so we're going to install the Django library, this section right here. We're going to use that library to generate the files. But again, because Django containers are ephemeral, once we leave the container, that library is gone. Okay, so we're in the container. We're going to use pip, the package manager for Python. Ruby has bundler, Java has Maven, and Node.js has npm. So if you hear those terms, they're all the same. I mean, they're doing the same functionality. Okay, so we're gonna install Django here. So here it says Django 324 is installed. So we'll just check that. And that's 324. And again, we'll check it on the host as well. And it's not installed on the host, so that's what will happen. Okay, so we're inside a container. The container has this library. We're now going to use that library to create our application. And in the tutorials, it'll tell you this function or this command. You can learn more about this command in that tutorial or in their docs. So here, so again, on the host, because we don't have Django installed, that would just not work out. Okay, so we have to install it. Run the start project command. We're going to call this my site. So Django has this concept of project and apps. So a project is kind of like, I would say, your system, and an app is kind of like a subsystem. So like a blog, a wiki, I don't know. So the different components of a project. So Django has this concept of project. Like many apps make up a project. Other frameworks, you might think of it as you have your application, and within that application, you have different services. But yeah, so yeah, if you ever heard those terms, that's kind of what it's saying. Okay, so Django admin, start a project. We're gonna call this new project my site, and we're gonna create it in this current folder. And okay, so when it runs, it's gonna generate a bunch of files. I wouldn't do this for every command line. Sometimes they generate like Git folders of files and README files. So, depending on the tool, you might want to save it to like new folder. But I've done this and I think it's safe, so I'm gonna do it here. And here you see it generates my site. So this is the project files, and then also this manage. Okay, so that's that. In order to run this app, we actually need the Django library. So the library wasn't just there to allow us to create these files, but it also is needed to run the application. So we'll do that. So this is the way you run the server. So I'm just going to show you what happens when you don't have the. Okay, so it's actually running. And then we're going to exit the container. We'll come back into the container. And now the new container doesn't have the library installed. So when we run, it bombs out because it doesn't have Django. So we want this Django library installed each and every time. So we kind of want to make sure it's in our Docker file, because that's kind of how others can build our application and make sure that they have everything working. Okay, so if we we're going to update this Docker file to make use of this requirements.txt, but we got to generate it. Django doesn't assume you use requirements.txt to manage your dependencies, so it's left it up to us. So we just give it the library name, and then we specify the minimum version we want. There's different, you can make it the exact version, greater than, and this is kind of like this tilde equal is saying if I specify 3.12, if Django has a version that's 3.2.1, it will not upgrade to that, but if Django has a new version that's like 3.1.5, it'll upgrade to the I guess the smallest integer. So again, if you remember semantic versioning, major is the left, minor is the middle, and patch is the right. So it'll upgrade Django to the patch level. If we specify just this, then it'll upgrade to 1.3.5. These will get upgraded, but 4.1 will not. If Django goes to 4.1, it won't take that. But if we don't specify the minor version, it will, all these will get updated. We'll get Django, pip will install these versions of Django. Okay, so that's what that is. And then we downloaded Django at first. It was a 3.2.4, so we'll just use that version. Okay, so we have a file that specify our dependencies, the libraries that we want to be installed in our container. So now we want, how to close this file. So now we want to make sure we add this file in. So copy requirements.txt to the user source app folder. And then we're going to run this command when we're building our container. Pip install and use the requirements file, and then we'll give it the requirements file name. So what we're telling, when we're building the image, we're saying use the Python-based image, set the working directory to this folder path, copy in from the host or from wherever we're running our build command from, and build, and then copy the requirements.txt file that's in that folder, which is here. And then after we have that file, we can then use pip to install all the packages listed in that file. So, you know, you can have package 1, version something, package 2, version something else. So right now we just have 1, but as your app build grows, you're gonna make use of more libraries. Okay, so now if we use docker compose build, this is actually gonna download and install the Django library. Okay, so now if we are to go into a container, and then try to run our server. So most of these frameworks provide a server for you, so you don't have to worry about wiring that up. It should work. So here it is. It's working. It didn't give us that earlier message where Django was not found. Okay, so I think we created a new project, and then I'm gonna stop here. Next time we'll bring up the app and then have our browser be able to interact with it. So now would be a good time to kind of save. One thing you'll note is that when Django starts, it creates a database file for you. We're eventually going to replace that with Postgres, but SQLite is a very easy database to start with, so it's just making it easier. So when we commit it, we definitely don't want to commit the database file. So let's see, add, we'll have a Docker file, Docker compose, the manage, my site, and the requirements. And then we don't want to commit these high catches, so we're going to use this command to get rid of them. Git remove cache my site high cache. And do that recursively. Okay, so here we're left with the files that we actually care about, and you can make sure from the UI that. So these we want to ignore. Okay, so the git commit. Oh yeah, I should use VS Code. Basic vanilla application generated, and to kind of ignore these files, we'll just create a ignore file. Git ignore. In it, we want to ignore anything with a PYC extension and anything with high cache folders. And then we also want to ignore the database. So anything that's SQLite. Okay, and then we'll just commit this this file. Ignore extraneous artifacts generated. Yeah. Auto generated by Python and Django. Okay, so it's good to commit often so that once you have something working, if you break it, you can always roll back. So that's good practice. And you definitely don't want to commit data. You don't want your data and database to be shared. There's other ways to handle data. So you want data to be out of your source code, and Python actually compiles down to C. So these other files see. So all these other files, they Python generates them based off of your Python file. So Python takes your Python files and then generates C stuff that it can that's actually executed. Um, but of course, we don't worry about that. We just worry about our Python files. But underneath the hood, that's what those are. And so we don't. So because it's auto-generated from your Python file, you just need to save off. Make sure you commit your Python file because all these other things are generated by um, Python and Django. So they change with your code. Okay, so I'll push that and I'll share with y'all. But I think that's it. Any questions, comments, concerns before I stop the video? All right, I'm gonna stop and then fix my audio. Uh, and then feel free to leave, but I'll, uh, I'll stick around. Oops, that's not. How do I stop recording?